All right. Well, hey, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us via Zoom. We have a full house at the screening, so very excited to get to talk to you a little bit about the film. Let's just dive into how did you even decide to make this documentary?
Oh man, it's such a long story. I'll just kind of hit you with it. It kind of started with my love for the band, which was uh if you guys have just watched the film, it was my father introduced me to the band when I was 12 or 13. And they were kind of a like an enigma, you couldn't really research them and there just wasn't really any information out there about them. You could kind of get little bits and pieces, but as far as what had happened to them or what they went on to do or who these people were, it just you couldn't find out about it. And I was living in LA. I was sort of, attempting to make movies and working in the industry and directing music videos here and there. And it was in 2008, I was reading a Rolling Stone magazine, and there was this news story about the Sonics reuniting and going on an arena tour in Europe. And I just was like, what? Even as a huge Sonics fan, I had never even considered them reuniting. And I'm a huge music fan, so I'm always thinking about who I want to reunite, but
Sure.
I'd never even thought about them reuniting. It was just like, what the fuck is this? And a couple weeks later, they announced this show at the Paramount Theater, and so I called my dad and I was like, "Hey, the the Sonics are reunited and they're playing in Seattle. I'm coming up. You and I are going to the show. We've never been to a concert together, but this is it, man. We're going." And my dad was just like totally flabbergasted. He was so excited, and so we went. And it was in the middle of the show, I was so taken by it. And it was just this amazing night. My dad was dancing and it was this like it was so magical. And I remember I just thought to myself, I'm gonna I'm gonna make a film about the Sonics.
Hmm.
And I just kept repeating it over and over in my head. I was like, I'm gonna fucking do this. I'm gonna make a movie about the Sonics. And gotta remember too, I was like maybe 20 or 21 years old at this show. I'm trying to remember so long ago now. And so I was filled with energy and I had just gotten signed to a pretty major agency in LA based off of another movie I had done. So I kind of just assumed I was like, oh, I'll just go to LA and get $1 million and fucking
Yeah,
make this little thing
that's
while I
how it
make it.
works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how this shit works, right? So I was just thinking about all that. And then so after the concert, I went uh, back to my dad's house, I think was where I was staying that night. And I searched online. I was trying to find out just a contact for the band. And I found this contact that just said like management@sonics.com or something like that.
Mhm.
And so I stayed up all night. I think I drank a fifth of whiskey and I wrote this insane email. It was this wild, wild email. I was like, I'm going to make this movie. This is why I'm the right guy to do it. And just had this huge film mapped out, this very expensive film, one that I never made, by the way. But I, you know, wrote this email and I got a reply the next morning from Buck Ormsby, who when they had reunited, they kind of brought him back to manage their reunion because I just don't think they knew who else to call. They were so like, what the hell do we do with this?
Right.
And so Buck wrote me back, and first of all, I recognized his name right away because his name was on the back of those albums, and I knew that he was the bass player for the Fabulous Wailers, and I was just like, why the fuck is Buck Ormsby writing me? And he wrote me back. He was like, "Hey man, you sound like a crazy person. Why don't you come down to Tacoma and let's get coffee and I want to meet you."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay." And so I went down to Tacoma and I met with Buck and my enthusiasm kind of matched his. He was very, as you can see from the film, he was tenacious and never gave up and he could just see that I was going to be one of those people and I I told him, I'm like, hey man, I just signed with this big agency. I was like, I could just take this shit to Hollywood and get $1 million and we'll make this thing. And he was like, I love it. I love you. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning of it. And I had a production company. This is way back in the day. It was called Oracle Films. And my partner was a guy named Brian Robinson. He was my producing partner. So I would kind of write and direct and he would produce. And so
Mhm.
I got Brian involved and Buck had a guy that he worked with down there and we involved him and it was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna go talk to my agency and I'll be back with a bag of money and we're gonna go do this thing. We'll jump ahead about 5 years. Uh, Nothing happened, and it was just this like I just I just kept telling everybody like I'm making a film about this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen. It just kept falling apart. Financing didn't come through, and it was really hard. And I was also just struggling in the business. I think I had moved back home at one point, and then ended up going back to Hollywood, and it was just like everything was such a struggle. Everything just kept falling apart, and this little thing that I thought it would be like my side project that I knocked out in 6 months ended up really being this thing that I just kept dragging through the mud with me. But like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make this movie, but um, it just wasn't coming together, and so kind of as a last ditch effort, I had an idea. The band was going to do a tour around Europe, and I had this idea that I could raise a little financing from some friends and family
Mhm.
and tour Europe with them and get some footage of them while they're on this big tour, some nice footage. So me, the cinematographer, Chris Kozer, and Brian went to around Europe. And my intention with that footage was basically just so I could cut like a little reel for an Indiegogo campaign.
Sure.
And, you know, I was like, okay, this will be great. We'll get at least three or $400,000 from this Indiegogo campaign. So we launched the campaign and it bombed.
Oof.
I mean, like hard. We
Yeah.
got like $11,000
Oh,
after Indiegogo takes their thing. And honestly, that was the death of the movie. The movie was dead. I don't think anybody really wanted to say that, but I'll tell you, it was fucking dead. There was no
sure.
way to do it. And so it would just kind of get brought up every once in a while. And I never, would kind of admit to failure. And I kept saying, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But, the movie I had dreamt up was this really big visual retelling of the band. It was going to be very like Fincher-esque, and I had all these things, and I just, it, you know, over the years, it became very clear to me that that movie is never going to happen under
Mhm.
the circumstances that I was working in or not working in. And so Buck and I would get on the phone every once in a while and we would just kind of pump each other up. But it was like I think we both kind of knew that it was dead and but we just didn't want to admit it. So when we got on the
Sure.
phone, it was almost like we were lying to each other, like, yeah, yeah, no, it's still we're fucking doing it, it's gonna happen. And my life was kind of falling apart in LA. Actually my life was completely falling apart in LA. And I had to move. I
Mm.
couldn't get a job anywhere and I was really broke. And my girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife. Um, Her parents had a house in Bozeman, Montana,
Mm.
and it was kind of a lifeline. They were like, you guys could just come out here, work on this house. Friend of a friend had a sushi restaurant in Montana. Yes, they do have sushi restaurants in Montana. I was shocked to find that out myself. And so I said, fuck it, I give up. And I give up on movies and I give up on all this. And it was like the lowest point of my life.
Mhm.
And we moved out to Bozeman. And it was right around that time Buck passed away. And over the throughout the years, there had been little bits of footage that I had shot, and I had shot an interview with Buck once I kind of understood that he was not doing well. Buck kind of let me know, like, I think we should get this in the can. And, when he passed away and I moved to Bozeman and I am working at this sushi restaurant in Montana, and I am like fucking kill me. Like, this is it. This is my life now. I just don't, I just didn't know what to do. And there was, and I like all the people I worked with, I never even told anybody that I had this background in film. I mean, I just didn't talk about it. I was embarrassed by it.
Mhm.
It's kind of, it was humiliating. It was just this total failure thing in my
Mhm.
life. And there was this one day I'm working at the restaurant and I was the door guy or the host. And it was a very busy restaurant. You know, 2 hour wait to get into the place. And so they stuck me up at the front because I was this grumpy asshole that just would tell everybody that, and deal with it. And this one day, it's a super busy night, one of the busiest summer nights. I get this phone call, and it's this woman. She said, "Hey, my name is Ashley. I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. I need a table for 12. Can you help me?" And I'm like, "There's no way. Like, there's literally no way. There's this huge wait. Like all these cowboys and college kids, and they're all trying to get into this place. They're all drunk, and they're giving me a hard time. I got this lady who wants a table for 12. I mean, it was like, there's no fucking way."
Yeah.
And she's like, we just got done driving for 12 hours. And she's like, God, is there anything you could do? And I swear to God, this is the only time when I was working at this restaurant I ever did this. I kind of looked out into the crowd of people in the parking lot that had been giving me shit all night. And I was like, fuck these people. I'm going to give this woman, this mom who needs a goddamn table. She's been driving for 12 hours. I'm going to get her and her family of fucking 12 into this place. And these assholes can wait another hour. I don't care. So I tell her, I'm like on the phone, I'm like, you know what? I got you. She's like, really? I'm like, dude, I got you. Come in here. Just ask for Jordan. I'm going to take care of you. She's like, oh my God, I love you. And I was like, I love you. Hung up the phone and I direct the team at the restaurant. I'm like, all right, I need to put a table of 12 together. They're like, what? I'm like, all that shit, put it together. These assholes can wait. And they're like, what the fuck's going on with Jordan? So I put this giant table together and this woman shows up, these two kids hanging off her arms, and she looks exhausted. And I was like, Ashley? And she goes, Jordan. I was like, 2 minutes. Go out in the parking lot. I'll come grab you. I got this. She goes, okay. She goes out into the parking lot and I finish putting the table together and I walk out into the parking lot and I look for her group and I see her, and standing next to her is this guy. And I recognize this guy instantly because I'm a kid from the Northwest who grew up in the 90s and I had Pearl Jam posters and shit all over my wall. They're one of my favorite bands, they still are to this day. And this guy turns around and I go, holy shit, you're Mike McCready. And he goes,
Nice.
yeah. And this is Ashley's husband. And he goes, "Oh, you're Jordan? You're getting me into the restaurant?" I was like, "Yeah, I am. But I'm making a movie about the Sonics, and I've been trying to get in touch with you for 10 years. And I got this thing, and I just like vomited this pitch at him. I didn't
I
even
love
think
it.
about it, which is totally unlike, like I didn't talk about it, but here I just kind of leapt at this thing. And he goes, "This sounds awesome. I'm in." And
Amazing.
I was like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, fuck yeah, man, let's do it." So I bring his family into the restaurant and he keeps calling me over and we just keep chatting and he's like, dude, this is amazing. He's like, Sonic's like one of my favorite bands. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, what is going on right now? And he pulls out his cell phone and he goes, cool. So who else do you need to get in touch with? And he literally fucking texted all of these people that I had tried to get in touch with. Because you got to realize when Buck passed away, he was kind of my inroad to the
Hmm.
stars. When he was
Yeah.
gone, I mean, there was no, like if you're trying to get in touch with Mike McCready, you don't just like Facebook Pearl Jam, right? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
it's not how this stuff
It's a
works. And
process.
so,
Mm.
well, it's a process that leads you to a dead end, at least it did for me. And so all of a sudden, you know, Mike's on board and he texts all these rock stars. They're all on board because of Mike. And I mean, it was crazy. Like, honestly, that encounter probably saved my life. I was totally depressed, if I'm being honest, and definitely saved the movie. I mean, there's no way it would have happened had that encounter not happened. And then all of a sudden, I had this new kind of newfound energy. It was like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I got to make this movie for Buck, and I don't give a shit if there's not any money. So I basically you know, every dollar I made working at that sushi restaurant, I started just injecting it into the film, trying to figure out how to do it. And then I
Mm.
just started knocking out these interviews, you know, I'd call up Chris Kozer, who was the DP, and like, hey, you got a commercial shoot coming up? He's like, yeah. I'm like, great. We're gonna steal all that shit and we're gonna take it out that night. I'm gonna go knock out a couple of these interviews, and you know, that's how the movie was finished, and that's kind of how it came together. And it was just basically just me at that point, you know. So I edited the movie. I didn't really know how to edit that well. I've cut music videos, but I mean, editing a feature length documentary is basically any editor's nightmare. And it became mine, but I had to figure it out. And yeah, I started kind of piecing this thing together, and and I, like I said, I had to kind of like kill the movie that I spent 10 years trying to make, and then go like, okay, well, what can I make? Like, what
Mhm.
is this? And you know, I was kind of combing through some old footage that I had, and I realized at one point I had this footage of Buck on stage at the Moore Theater, and that became kind of my North Star. I was like, okay,
Sure.
well, this is this is where this story kind of ends. And I assumed I'd get some big rock star to narrate it. I never wanted to narrate it. I hate being on camera. I don't like talking in public. I'm not someone who wants to be in front of the camera at all. I don't like the sound of my voice. Like, but none of these, I couldn't afford to fucking find anybody else. So I bought
Right.
some sound recording equipment, and I set up this little sound booth in my basement at this house I had, and I just started going down there and just like randomly talking into this microphone, and then using these chunks to kind of piece things together. And it was just this, and it was just me. Like, it was just this weird little vacuum. And that was, anyway, to answer your question, um, because it's hard to answer that one little bit without kind of letting you.
No, the context is the whole answer. I
Yeah,
love it.
we're probably good now, right? This is it.
I think that's the
Um,
Q&A, right?
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but I
It
feel
was
like for you,
pretty
like
extraordinary.
as wild as that story is, it's actually the perfect way for a Sonics documentary to come about, because they were so underground for so long, and like they were like the musician's musician. But I don't know, the way you ended up telling the story was sort of the heart that was needed in it. And I think, it's a fascinating journey that led you to getting it made the way you made it. So kind of worked out in the
Yeah.
end. Did you Were you nicer to people at the restaurant after that? Like, oh, who knows what'll happen?
Well, yeah, because I wasn't so depressed. I wasn't so it's funny. Yeah, I mean, it was I mean, it was such a bizarre thing to have happen, and now Mike is like a friend of mine, and
Yeah.
texts me about, albums coming out or whatever. It's crazy. Yeah, I definitely was nicer to people that came into the restaurant after that.
That's great. All right. Well, I just want to thank you for spending some time and giving us a little context into the story. Thank you for screening this film and for not giving up on it, even when you thought you had given up on it. So I think that's sort of the DIY spirit of independent film. So we love being able to show it.
I'm honestly honored you guys are showing it. The fact that it's being released into theaters is just can't tell you how bizarre it is to me.
Yeah.
So thank you, thank you, thank you, and everyone who shows up. You said you got a packed house there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. Like, it's just this whole thing is just completely nuts. So no, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Jordan, and good luck with the film doing well in theaters and to finally be able to put it to bed. It's done. You don't have to think about this movie anymore.
Thank you so much.
All
Thanks.
right. Bye.